Good evening. My name is Alicia Yokoyama, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's special seed saving presentation. It's National Gardening Week and the 1-year anniversary of the Lake Oswego Public Library Seed Library. So what better way to celebrate than with a presentation from Kay Everts, founder and manager of the Seeds for Sharing Seed Libraries at the Oak Lodge and Gladstone Public Libraries and graduate of the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance Seed School. Please welcome Kay Everts.
Thank you, Alicia. I'd like to start with the Clackamas County Land Acknowledgement, acknowledging that we are living and prospering on the lands that were the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde homelands, basically. So this presentation is about seed saving, a standard method, and one called an adaptation method, which I bet you've never heard of. And we'll also touch on the 2024 Adopt a Crop Clackamas Seed Saving Project. You can still participate. So how many of you are seed savers? Alicia, do you save seeds?
We've tried.
Yeah? And why do you save seeds?
Well, it seems more economical than buying them again.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it's good to be environmental as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you find anything, are there challenges for you?
I'm just more nervous that it's not going to be a healthy seed.
Ah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I'm worried about drying it out completely.
Oh.
That it doesn't get moldy, stuff like that.
Right, right.
How do I know this is a good seed?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd like to share with you some of my reasons for seed saving. Who remembers 2020 and our fires? This is actually how I went to my community garden plot in Gladstone at Meldrum Bar to work in my garden. And also, I'm worried about our changing climate. I grew up on a farm, and farmers worry a lot. Farmers worry often about things they can't control. But one thing I've learned is something about adaptation, that the more times you grow a plant, save the seeds, and replant those seeds, the more adapted it becomes to your local environment. Another thing that concerns me is what's happening to our seed industry. This graphic shows what happened between 1996 and 2013. The big orange circles are chemical companies. If you see it in orange, it's a chemical company. Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, DuPont, Dow. By 2013, look at what they owned. These big clusters of seed companies that had been independent. And Monsanto in 2013 had 1,676 patents, which restricts people's ability to do things with those seeds and plants. And what we've seen over time is a lot of changes. Back in 1800, there weren't any seed companies. None. Think about it. Farmers swapped seeds, neighbors shared seeds, and then in the mid-1800s, the US government actually got in the business of distributing seeds to people. And then about 1900, we saw the emergence of seed companies. And then from there, we saw the development of synthetic fertilizers, commercial hybrids, and a thing called the Green Revolution. Now that sounds nice, doesn't it? But unfortunately, what it was is the advent of big agriculture and monocropping and so the breeding that was done for big ag involved breeding things that could ship easily, could store well on shelves, and had high yields. There was nothing about flavor or nutrition. And more on monocropping, well, this graphic shows that an 80-year change in the availability of varieties in the commercial market space. The top part shows what was commercially available in 1903, and then the bottom is 80 years later, 1983. So let's take a closer look at lettuce. 497 varieties in 1903 were available to people. 80 years later, only 36. Think about what you can get in the grocery store. Okay, if you had to list the lettuces that you could purchase, what would you come up with?
Like 3 or 4, like butter lettuce, romaine, green, red. Maybe that's it.
Pretty much, right. In the butter, you'll get a red or a purpley, a green or a purpley red type. Same with leaf, green or red. Iceberg, romaine, might be missing one, but that's pretty limited. And they all look alike depending on, it doesn't matter which grocery store you go to. They all look alike. Monocropping. So the issue is this. If our farmers now are all growing all the same variety of everything, what happens if there's some kind of disease? Anyone remember what happened in Ireland? The Great Potato Famine? It was because Ireland had started, all the farmers only grew one variety of potato, and it got hit with a blight. Over 1 million people died, and another million left the country in search of a better place to make a living. Monocropping. Another concern I have, and reason I save seeds, is that the nutritional content of our purchased food has been declining over time. That's very concerning. You try to eat healthy, you're picking vegetables. What could be wrong with them, right? And then you look at this chart on spinach from 1950 to 1999, and you see the loss of nutritional content. Yikes. I'd like to recommend a book, and there's 5 copies in the LINCC libraries, which is great. If you are trying to figure out, well, Kay's telling me I've got some problems when I go shopping and trying to find something nutritious, this book will help guide you. It will help, it'll go through different crops and tell you which varieties have more nutritional content than others. That's pretty handy, isn't it? So that'll help you in shopping, and it'll also, if you're going to grow something, help guide what varieties you might want to grow for yourself. And let's look at an example. Here's one, corn. There's a nutrient called anthocyanin. It helps fight cancer, amongst other things. And corn, in its dried state, if you could see the dry kernels, if they're white, like our super sweet corn, it has very little of this nutrient in it, 1.54. If you choose yellow instead, it's a huge increase. If you can get a corn that's red, purple, or blue, even more nutrient value. And right offhand, an easy rule of thumb, if you've got a choice between, say, a green lettuce and a red or purpley one, pick that darker color. Carrots, you know how we now have some really pretty colors available? White has less nutrient value than purple. And orange is good, better than yellow. just, it's like the rainbow spectrum. Go to that end, and you'll do better food-wise. Further concern with the seed industry, now there's only 3. There's been consolidation of those giants. Chem China and Syngenta merged, Dow and DuPont merged, and Bayer and Monsanto merged. And so one thing that's done for Monsanto is they can kind of hide their name in a way. They can hide behind Bayer because Monsanto has, I think, over 2,000 lawsuits just over Roundup going. But I say, free the seed. Let's get it back to us, the people. And there's an initiative that started about 12 years ago called the Open Source Seed Initiative. It was created by a number of the plant breeders, a lot of them in Oregon, but also around the U.S., and the land-grant University of Wisconsin, is heavily involved in creating it as well. It's an attempt to model after the open source software initiative. Open source software gives people code that they can use, but the rules are you can't copyright it, and it's free. It's free for anybody. So apply that to the world of seeds. You can't patent these seeds. So any breeder who pledges their new creations, their new seeds to this Aussie, as they call it, they are offering them out to us to use in any way we want. We can grow the seed, we can sell the seed. We just can't patent it. And if we create a new variety from their seeds, we can't patent that either. Those are the rules, and it's pretty darn good. Some of the people you might know who are in this initiative, Don Tipping from Siskiyou Seeds has 11 pledged varieties. Here's another favorite of mine, adaptive seeds. Some of the people viewing maybe use the purchase adaptive seeds. I love their seeds. And Andrew Still has 15 pledged varieties. Carol Deppe, she has, it's cut off, 21 varieties. And she's one of my favorite garden book authors. There's 3 of her books that are fantastic. She lives in Corvallis, Oregon. So these are all Oregon-based plant breeders. But the guy who really wins on the number of pledged varieties is Frank Morton. You may or may not know Frank. Frank has a seed company called Wild Garden Seeds in Philomath. And he, by himself, has created, and his wife, over 100 varieties of lettuce. One of his claims to fame is outrageous lettuce here. It's a romaine. It's the first food that was planted, grown, and eaten on the International Space Station. First food to do that in outer space, which is pretty cool. Whoops, I've got some running text there. So there's 50 plant breeders now and 529 varieties that have been pledged and 77 participating seed companies. Now here's a fellow who's out of state. Joseph Lofthouse is in Paradise, Utah, and he's pledged 11 different varieties. And we will be hearing about Joseph on and off through this presentation because he is a landrace or adaptive variety seedkeeper. And he is one of the founding members of Going to Seed. Oh, and you know what? And one of them is a brochure on Going to Seed. And Joseph is the source of 3 of the crops that We are growing as part of the 2024 Adopt a Crop project. Joseph is also the author of this book called Landrace Gardening. Yep, another reason to save seeds, cost of seeds. So you might think, well, one packet of seeds, couple bucks, right? Well, in some cases it's $5, and that's okay if you're only growing one thing. But if you want to plant an entire garden, it starts to add up, right? Of course, you can always go to your local seed library. So let's say you buy this melon for $5, and look at all those seeds. Look at all those seeds. If you were to save those seeds, dry them, and package them up like a seed company who only gives you just so many in a package, right? Because you don't need a whole ton of melon seeds. You could maybe make, you might have $60 worth of seeds just from that one melon. So the question is, can you save the seeds from that purchased melon and plant them? And of course, give some to the seed library. Well, it depends. Is it open pollinated or a hybrid? So that's the first question you have to ask as a seed saver. Open pollinated versus hybrid. Open pollinated varieties produce offspring that will be identical to their parent. They reproduce true. What you see as the parent, you save those seeds, that's what you'll get in the next generation, et cetera, et cetera. You can plant that every year, and it will always look the same. Hybrids, on the other hand, somebody, to create a hybrid, has literally taken the pollen from variety A and moved it to the flower of variety B, and these two varieties don't look at all alike, and created a hybrid seed. Like Sungold is one of the most famous tomato hybrids. I love Sungold. There's just nothing as sweet as a Sungold cherry tomato, yum. But it's a hybrid. And if I try to save those seeds and plant them, you could get a straight yellow cherry, you could get a red cherry, or you could get an orangey Sungold-like looking tomato, but it won't taste like Sungold. Been there, done that. Tried it, didn't work. Mostly, I had some volunteers come up in my yard, and I let them go. And one tasted different than the other even, but neither were a Sungold.
But they're still edible and still okay to eat?
Oh,
It's
yes.
just- oh, okay.
Right. Oh, yeah. They're not poisonous. Yes, you can certainly, you'll get something else, and it may be delightful or not. Yeah. So for seed saving, I wouldn't recommend saving hybrid seeds. Okay, now let's look at where's a good place to start if you're a new seed saver. Peas, beans, lettuce, and tomatoes. And I've got a handout, standard seed saving on one side, featuring these 4 crops. And they're all very easy. But do you know why they're easy? No. Anybody else? It's because of how they are pollinated. They're what's often called sulfurs or self-pollinated. And there's something unique about all 4 of those crops. They all have what's called a perfect flower. Here's a drawing. The male part has the pollen. Here's the female part with its ovary here. And the the magic about a self-pollinated, easy crop is that the pollen moves from the male part to the female part when the blossom is still closed. It's amazing, isn't it? Who thought that was possible even? But it's just amazing that that's how the pollination takes place, that this flower can pollinate itself. Yeah, so that's what makes it easy. But could a self-pollinator still cross? Is there any chance it could still cross? Hello? Well, the picture has the culprit right there. If you've got a busy insect, somebody who with a long snout like that goes and pokes into the flower right when it's being pollinated, and then goes to another one, does the same thing, pokes into it, it could possibly move some pollen. It's a bit on the remote side. There's like a 1 to 5% chance of crossing if you're growing two different varieties of peas, beans, lettuce, tomato next to each other. I mean, those four crops don't cross with each other, but you know, two different peas grown right next to each other. In fact, peas only 0.5% chance of crossing. So really, really low. Beans, it varies. Lettuce and tomatoes, about 3% chance of crossing. Okay, well, we're wanting to keep our seeds pure here. So what do? How do we keep this from happening, from crossing? What we need to do is observe the standard recommended isolation distance between varieties. And the nice thing about the easy guys is it's only 10 feet. That's not too bad. Most of us can manage that in our garden if we're intent on saving seeds. For me, if I want to do seeds from different tomatoes, I just make sure they're 10 feet apart, and then I don't worry about it. Now, this graphic did not translate well on this computer. Isn't that funny? Yeah. But I'll refer you now to this handout. This is from Seed Savers Exchange. You can get this on their website in their seed saving area. And it's a wonderful guide for doing standard seed saving. Let's take a look at it to get oriented. It will show you the crop, what species it is and family it's in, if it's an annual or biennial, and how it's pollinated. Look at the different ways plants are pollinated. Self-pollinated, which we've been talking about, wind-pollinated, insects, or a combination. And then, for each crop, it gives you a recommended isolation distance for seed saving. So as you scan through it, you see some that are 10 to 20 feet, but you see some that require a lot more distance. Yeah. Let's look at corn on the second page. Corn, ZMAs. How's it how's it pollinated? Wind pollinated, yeah. And 800 feet to half a mile. Whoa. That's hard to do. Especially if you're in an urban environment, right? Do you know what your neighbors are growing across the fence, or even, half a block from where you are? So that can make it more challenging to do some standard seed saving other than the easy guides. But this guide, you can use this to go through and say, well, which ones are only 10 feet? Why don't I just start with the easy ones? Get my feet wet that way. And the handout also shows population size. How many plants should you be saving seeds from to capture any genetic diversity within that crop. You can have viable seeds from saving from only one plant for our easy guys, but it would be nice if you save from 5. As a seed librarian, I would accept seeds from one plant from people, bringing them in. And when people turn in seeds, the slip they fill out, they say how many plants they saved from. So the people who want to use the seed can decide one plant, yeah, you know, I want to try it anyway. These look like really good seeds. I want to plant these. When we grow at the seed garden, we'll use this maintenance level. We'll save from 5 plants for these easy guys. There's other things like parsley where we've got to save from 20 plants, and corn a lot more. Genetic preservation, just to give you an understanding of what that means in this handout, if you're the only person that has this variety, let's say it's been passed down for generations in your family, then you want to save from at least 20 different plants. Yeah, so that, because genetics in plants sometimes will break down. You know, things happen, a gene becomes a little defective, and if you've only saved from one plant, that could be the end of the line for that special variety that you're trying to carry forward. We don't have enough time to really dig into seed saving. My hope was to give you information on the handout and here on the easy to save seeds so that you can get started with it. Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's a brick. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, excellent. Good, good. Oh, fantastic. That's great. So we've been looking at the self-pollinated group. You saw from this handout that others have different pollination systems. Wind for corn, which means the isolation distance is like a half a mile, as we saw, and there's other plants in between. Uh-huh. Oh, and also there's some that are insect pollinated. Okay, what's the average distance a bee can fly? Some bees can go a couple miles. That makes it a little more challenging. This I highly recommend as a good winter read. You know, when your niece, after you get her hooked on seed saving, right? Get her a copy of this book, or tell her to go to the library and check it out.
She's become a very much a, I won't say why, but, well, yeah, why? Her sister became paralyzed, and she's now her caregiver.
Oh.
And they're living in their mom's house. They inherited that. And so she's now getting into Earth Mother stuff. I mean,
Earth
she's
Mother,
got a
oh
sewing
yeah.
machine, and she's embroidering.
Oh, very nice.
And I mean, yeah.
Homesteader.
Yes, and
Yeah.
That's the next thing, that I can introduce her to. Yeah.
Excellent. This is great for homesteaders or people who want to learn seed saving. And you know, most of us, after we've saved one kind of seed, we've got to try the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And before you know it, you're opening a seed library. And before you know it, you're running a seed garden.
Before you know it, you're talking to a stranger.
That's right, about seeds. We're talking about seeds. We in the industry who have achieved that level, we're called seed heads. It's just a nickname for seed savers. But this book, it is a wonderful read. It's great for winter reading. You read a little section in the front that tells you the basics, and then there's 4 beautifully written, beautifully photographed pages on each crop that walks you through how to do each crop, and it's fantastic. So you can just pick and choose in the book what you want to learn. Now, we're going to totally switch gears, and we're going to plunge into a different style of seed saving. And it's called adaptation seed saving, or modern landrace seed saving. And we'll look more closely in a bit at what the word landrace means, because for most people, most audiences I have, if I ask, do you know what a landrace is? They'll say, I've never heard of the term, right? That's the common reaction. So don't worry if you don't know that one. And we'll look at our Adopt a Crop program. On the back side of this handout, you've got the adaptation seed saving method, or mixing it up, as I like to call it. So why wouldn't we want to keep our seeds pure? And why would we want to mix things up? Well, climate change, tough growing conditions. How do we make sure our seeds can adapt, our plants can grow in our new environment? This helps. And we can add more nutrition and more resilience to our crops. And you'll find this is an easier seed saving method than keeping it pure. There's room for both. I do both. There's some things I don't want to have cross, and I'm very careful with them. But there's other things, it's like, let's cross them up. Let's see if we can improve upon their ability to adapt to our environment. And we're back to adaptation again, right? The more times you grow, save seeds, replant, the more adapted it becomes. But if the genetics in your variety vary a lot, it makes it a lot easier for that crop to adapt. So why do they all look different? It's because this is a landrace. This is a modern landrace. And this Clackamas Maxima landrace squash, this is what we grew as a community in 2023. This was our crop that we grew out. And this particular harvest was done at Rose Villa by a couple friends of mine who agreed to grow a whole bunch of this squash so that we had lots for people. We had a harvest party at the end of the program, and we'll do that again this year. And Jean and Ed, my friends, they grew a whole bunch because in any given year, some of our gardeners will have failures for one reason or another, right? The clay was too much. The pests got them. Hail took out some of the squash. We had hail last year, right? And so they grew extras for people. And look at that variety. So a landrace is a food crop with a lot of genetic diversity, which contributes to its ability to survive new pests, new diseases, or changes in cultural practices, like the way we garden. Changes in the environment, like climate. And this is the definition from Joseph Lofthouse, our landrace seedkeeper. The term itself is German, and it was landrace, which means country breed, or the breed of the people, the peasants. And the first time I ran into it was with Hungarian landrace parsley. I think I got the seed from Adaptive Seeds. And I thought, what is this landrace? So I did some research. And in Hungary, this particular parsley grows everywhere, throughout the whole country. But it varies a little from one community to another. And within any growing population, the plants vary just a little bit, one to another, which makes it genetically very robust and more adaptable. And it's all good. Here we go. So how do you create an adaptation variety, or how do you do it as a community? This, by the way, these these photos are from that Clackamas Maxima squash, which I got this squash from Joseph Lofthouse in about 2016, and then grew it every year in the seed garden. And this is what it looked like in 2019. And you can see, if you're a squash lover, you look at it and say, oh, that one looks a lot like Oregon sweetmeat. And oh, I think I see some Hubbard type elements in here, maybe kabocha. So all the different genetics are in there. So basically step one, if you were to do a brand new landrace or adaptation variety from scratch, you plant broadly all sorts of different varieties and let them mix. And then, second step, you let nature select for you. Hail damage, okay. These plants did make it though. This is from our crop last year. Don't pamper the variety. We want it to be tough. We want these plants to survive with little fertilizer, little help from us. I mean, think about it. Think about being a gardener where you throw the seeds out and you don't have to worry so much, right? Isn't that nice?
I'm that type of gardener, so this speaks to me. Yeah.
It's perfect for you. You don't have to worry, and you don't have to have any guilt. You don't have that, yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, I should be helping my poor plants. Nah, let them fend for themselves, right? And grow as organically as you can. So Joseph Lofthouse again says, I welcome the bugs, pests, and viruses and molds into my garden because they're teaching my plants how to survive. They're selecting for plants that thrive in the ecosystem exactly as it exists. And Joseph has harsh conditions. He lives in a high mountain valley in Utah. His growing season's only about 84 days long, frost to frost. And so when he wanted to create that squash landrace, well, he did it because he couldn't get squash to grow in that short of a season. And he just mass planted all these varieties. First year, only four fruits got just barely ripe enough to have viable seeds. He did it again the next year, had a little bit longer growing season, got more seeds, replanted them, and by that third year, that squash had adapted to his short growing season. Isn't that amazing how fast it can adapt? And after you've done that, like Joseph did for, say, 3 years, if you're starting from scratch, then you start selecting for the things you value. And if, like Joseph, you had a big piece of land and you were doing it all by yourself, you could decide exactly what was important to you. Maybe the color of the squash or the shape of the squash. For me, flavor's always number one. Flavor. Could be the ease of growing it, early ripening, could be disease resistance, whatever's important to you. And when we did the project last year, at the harvest party, people brought their squash. We baked a slice of each of them, and we tasted them and scored them. And we decided taste was important to us. So we had blah as one score, or just okay, or wow, this is pretty good, or man, this is excellent. And we only saved from the better categories. We didn't want anything that was blah in there for sure. And by doing that over and over again, you're improving your variety too. And then you have to save seeds, of course. You have to save the seeds so that you've got them to plant the next year so that they can adapt again, right? That's making sense, isn't it? And then, of course, share them with your seed library.
But then, okay, I'm confused by it. So these aren't heirloom though, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Heirloom.
Heirloom.
Are these heirloom? Yeah. Okay, so heirloom, that's interesting because you could take heirloom seeds. You could take any group of heirloom squash seeds, and Joseph probably had a whole bunch when he did his first planting, because he went after everything he could get that was in the species Cucurbita maxima, because they will all cross within the species. And he could have had Hubbard would be considered an heirloom, sweetmeat, kabocha, those are all heirlooms. And so you can start with them, but in the end, you're mixing up the genetics. Yes, and all heirloom seeds are open pollinated. Mm-hmm. Me? Yeah, I grew up on a farm. Yeah, although you know what's funny? As a kid, I didn't like weeding. Wah. I have to go out and weed? Nah, I'd rather read a book. But I learned the skills. Excuse me. I learned the skills, and it's funny because what happened is the desire to garden just kept creeping back in as I got older. And then I want a garden. Oh, I'm a renter. Can I find space for a garden? Is there a community garden? So when I finally had space, then I could go at it, full force. Yeah, that was fun. And there's nothing like retiring to really up your game as a gardener. Here we go. So, as I mentioned, our 2023 project was that squash that you keep seeing. And the participating libraries were the 7 that you see here. And now we're glad that for 2024, Oregon City and Canby both open seed libraries, and they're both participating as well. Yay. Yeah. So all 9 of us are going for it. And the crops we're doing there's 4. Astronomy Domine corn, also from Joseph Lofthouse, but he got it from a guy in Indiana who for 30 years had been working on developing this great mix that looks like this. So this is an old-fashioned sweet corn. It's not your super sweet white.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 15 minutes.
Okay.
At 7 o'clock.
It will be done. Yeah. Okay. So were you here for the discussion on anthocyanins, the nutrient? Okay. So in corn, if the corn when it's dried like this, if the kernels were white, there's very, very little of that nutrient in it. And that's one of the cancer-fighting nutrients. But the more color you have in your dry corn like that, the more anthocyanin you have. So this corn's loaded with it. And it's interesting because in its eating stage, that's what it looks like. And what's fun is you go to your plant and you pull one off and you think, I wonder what this one's going to look like. And you open it and it could be, it could look white. Or it could have those flecks of purple. Or it could be pastel. It's really pretty cool. Yeah. And then when it dries, that's what it looks like. So that's when we're going. Here's the other one. This one is our attempt to come up with an adaptation variety or landrace from the beginning. And last year, we planted 5 different varieties of runner beans at the seed garden, harvested the seeds. That's a picture of them. And this is what we're giving out as one crop for people who want to help us grow runner beans for the 2nd generation. And so we want to keep growing this one and see what happens with it. And also what I found is at the Gladstone and Oak Lodge seed libraries, we always run out of runner bean seeds. So I thought we need to grow a bunch of our own. And some people grow runner beans just for the flowers and the plants because they're beautiful. This is how they looked growing in our seed garden, and beautiful flowers. But these with the white in there, you'll get different colors of flowers too. And then there's our squash again, a little bit different look from what one person harvested. And then this year we're adding a butternut. This butternut will store for over a year. Over a year, and it'll still be good. And that, oh, by the way, you can make a great pumpkin pie out of that maxima. You could do it from the butternut too. This, often butternuts are used in savory dishes as well. It's really great. So just a word about squash. Oops, I don't want to do that yet. Let me back up. Okay, there's 3 main species we grow here. And they all have what's called monoecious flowers, separate male and female flowers. Now, that's pretty easy to identify why it's female, right? That's the ovary. It's like the little starter squash that hasn't been fertilized yet. When the pollen moves by insect from a male flower to a female, then it goes on to develop into a squash. Whoops. Insect pollinated. If you were trying to save the squash as, let's say you wanted to grow Oregon sweetmeat and you didn't want it to cross, as we've looked at, 800 feet to half a mile separation. So that's hard. Here's some of the varieties that are this species, Cucurbita maxima. Look at that. Some of the pumpkins are in there. Buttercup, kabocha, sweetmeat, and many more. This is a big group of squash. They will all cross with each other. They'll all cross with each other within that species. And if you're making a landrace or an adaptation variety, this one's pretty easy to do because it doesn't matter what your neighbor's growing. We welcome the genetics from your neighbor's squash into the collection because our whole goal is to get this to be very genetically vibrant so that it will adapt. Now here's Cucurbita moschata, all the butternuts, and black footstew and a couple others. But mostly we think of moschata as the butternut clan. And look how interesting these shapes are. So if you grow our seed, it could look like a classic butternut or it could have a long neck. They're all delicious. They all taste great. They'll cross again with each other, but not with the maxima. Here's the one that you have to watch out for that I won't attempt to do a community project on. Cucurbita pepo, that species includes most pumpkins, that's okay. Most summer squash, zucchinis. Can you imagine a cross between a pumpkin and a zucchini? Nah, not so much. A summer squash and a delicata, not so great either. Acorn squash, but this is the one right here, this culprit, decorative gourds. And you know what? Okay, since I run 2 seed libraries and I have control over this one element here, if we get a seed company donating decorative gourds, I throw them away. Because anybody who's seed saving or says, or gets a volunteer growing in their yard, oh, let's see what that turns out to be, right? These guys, the gourds, have a compound in them that's a bit toxic. It won't kill you, but it'll make your stomach upset. And every once in a while, in the last 20 years, there's been an incident where one of these pretty little guys crossed with a delicata squash, and it got out on the marketplace, and people reported poisonous squash, poisonous squash. Well, you know, nobody died from it, but they got upset stomachs. And, you know, You don't want that in your squash, right? You don't want that in your food. So that's the part that becomes problematic. That and the fact that zucchini will cross with everybody else, and like the other squash, you need a half-mile isolation minimum to keep that from happening, right? So, don't have to bother with that. Better to stick with the two other main species there. Again, just reiterating, no issues there with crossing. Don't worry about what your neighbors have going on. And people who wanted to sign up, if your if your niece wanted to sign up, she could still do it. I can give you a little slip that has this UR code on it. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, and so the parents all had to fill out a form online. We gave seeds. If either anybody here wanted to do that, they could still sign up because we have extra seeds. And then I get to email everybody monthly or more often saying, how's it going? Here's some handy tips for you to help you and answer questions. You need sun because these are all sun lovers. And you have to get your seeds and then agree to return the seeds. Oh my gosh. Yeah. 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 That's really cool. That's fun. So to recap, standard seed saving and adaptation seed saving. There's a place in our lives for both of them. I do both. Standard, you have to observe the protocols to get it right. Isolation distances, etc. Adaptation, a little more freewheeling. And how can you support the seed library? Grow and save seeds using either method. And bring them in, fill out a slip. It'll ask you some questions about how you grew them, etc. And you will be helping the library and the community, and that's a great thing. And you should get a lot of satisfaction out of it. Okay, I know this is a long shot, but I just have to put the pitch in. You could come over to Oak Grove on any Thursday morning and volunteer at our seed garden. Oak Grove. Okay, it's there's Milwaukee, then just south is Oak Grove. We're unincorporated, and Jennings Lodge and Gladstone. So we're in unincorporated, just south of Milwaukee, and you could learn hands-on seed saving with us. We have a lot of fun, but we need more help. Or you could start your own seed garden, and I would help you if you had people who wanted to volunteer, the space to do it, and water. That's what you need. And lastly, this is an organization, I'm on their advisory board, Going to Seed. It's a .org, a nonprofit. Our goal is to provide free information for people about adaptation gardening, and there's free courses online. It's a pretty cool group. And that's it. Questions? Thank you. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience.